Hello everybody, this is Connor, BoatsDon'tSink, here with another Shadowverse Evolve video. This time we're going to be looking at our tier list and meta overview for CP03, Cardfight Vanguard. This is the third collaboration pack for the game, following Uma Musume and Idolmaster Cinderella Girls. This is the first one that is not tied to a Cygames IP or game. Instead, we're looking at the Bushiroad side of things, and getting a collaboration with Cardfight Vanguard. Everything in this collaboration set is old Vanguard. It's seasons 1 and 2, so this is all like pre-2013, at least pre-2013, maybe during 2012, maybe even during early 2013, I guess. Very early stuff. Seasons 1 and 2. It's the first really 8 sets of Cardfight Vanguard. So if you played back then, like me, if you're, you feel back pain when you wake up and your knees creak when you're walking down the stairs, this is the Cardfight Vanguard set for you. None of that reboot stuff or the second reboot stuff. Yeah, CP03 contents. There's not a whole lot here, unlike most sets where I get to look at a bunch of different things that are sort of mashed together to make one full booster pack. No, our contents are Cardfight Vanguard. So each of the 6 classes represents one of the clans, so sorry if your favorite clan didn't make it in. We have Aqua Force, Royal Paladin, Pale Moon, Kagero, Shadow Paladin, and Oracle Think Tank. I know the big one a lot of people were sad about missing out on is Nova Grappler, since Kamui, one of the kind of main characters of the original series, played it. But no, he got replaced by Asuka and Leon. Leon at least is a relevant character. Asuka is kind of funny that she ended up there, because like, I don't really think she did anything more than any of the other side clans did, so whatever. But that being said, Pale Moon does have one of the coolest, most unique decks. So, yeah, Cardfight Vanguard, everything is split clan to class. So we got 6 classes, 6 clans here. And it does come with a few new unique mechanics that are exclusive to, playing Cardfight Vanguard. The first of which is the starting amulets. So if you're familiar with the rules of Cardfight Vanguard, you have a grade 0 that you start with in play that is your starting Vanguard. This is basically our equivalent of that. They are amulets that if you are playing Vanguard as your universe, you have to play at least one card with the starting amulet keyword in your deck, and you start with it face down until post mulligan, at which point you reveal it face up, and it starts in play. This means you get to play a 39 card deck and essentially get a 5th card in your opening hand, which is kind of insane, honestly. It's a really powerful mechanic. Most of the effects aren't super busted on these things. They're all thematic to sort of help with whatever each clan is trying to do, other than the starter deck ones, which are busted and both just give a follower +1/+1. So it lets you just play a goblin and make it a 3/3 on turn 1, which is a little obnoxious. Those are pretty good. They are banned in Japan. You can't actually play them, but they're not banned in English, so play them. Take advantage of that. The other new thing we have is trigger units. So again, if you're familiar with Cardfight Vanguard, when your Vanguard attacks, you perform drive checks by revealing the top cards of your deck. If they have trigger icons, which are those things you're going to see in the top right of these cards, you get extra bonus effects. In the Shadowverse set, some cards will have single drive or twin drive, meaning they reveal 1 or 2 cards from the top of the deck. And similarly, if you hit cards with these trigger icons on them, you get bonus effects. From left to right, we have yellow, the critical trigger, which gives a follower on your field +2 attack. Red is the draw trigger, which allows you to draw a card. Blue is the stand trigger, which refreshes a follower on your field, but that follower can't attack enemy leaders for the remainder of the turn. And green is the heal trigger, which gives your leader +3 defense. These are quite powerful. They can have pretty swingy effects, especially with the number of cards that have both Storm and Twin Drive. where you can just like slam them and swing, and if you flip crits, you just dome your opponent for like half their life total. So yeah, that's fun and interactive. But overall, I think these are kind of cool design. They are something that gives Vanguard as a universe a reason to keep being played over some of the individual classes. Especially since the way that this collaboration pack is set up a lot differently from the first two, where it actually encourages you to stay within your one class because of synergies within the same clan. Whereas the other two kind of like had all their key cards that interacted with each other split between multiple classes, so you had to play the universe anyway. The trigger units are kind of the reason to play Cardfight Vanguard Universe, as opposed to just saying, ah yes, I'm going to play Dragoncraft and just play all the good Kagero cards anyway. Trigger effects are what you lose out on. You only, you still perform the drive checks otherwise, but you only get these trigger effects if you're playing Vanguard Universe. So yeah, taking a look at some of the new and updated decks with this set, it is primarily Cardfight Vanguard decks. Not a whole lot outside of the universe itself really gets supported by this set. So we're going to start off with taking a look at the universe decks here. First up, we have Aquaforce, our forest class deck. In Cardfight Vanguard, Aquaforce's main mechanic revolves around attacking multiple times in a turn and gaining bonus effects based on the number of times you attack. So in the actual Aquaforce deck for Shadowverse, you can see here that a number of these cards, well, really specifically Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom, our sort of boss unit, gains bonuses for being the 4th attack by an Aquaforce follower on your turn. And then our other legendaries here just give us extra ways to sort of enable this, getting 4 attacks. Diamantes can, on death, summon 2 1-drops. Basil can bounce a 1-drop to summon a 3-drop. So by combining these with a lot of 1-drop cheap followers that have Rush and Storm, you can very easily just attack, 2 or 3 times with 1-drops and then start swinging with your bigger guys to enable. Some followers will have 3rd attack effects, and then some have 4th attack effects. Generally, your lower tier units, like Valeria here, are going to have 3rd attack effects, and then your big boss monsters, like Maelstrom, are going to have the 4th attack effects, where you just get bonus stuff for attacking a bunch. So this does end up making it similar to actual Forestcraft, where you're kind of doing combo-y stuff and like bouncing dudes and playing a bunch of dudes and getting like small chippy attacks. But instead of caring about the number of cards we play, we care about the number of attacks we do. Which kind of also turns it into a bit of an aggro deck, where starting from like turn 3 and 4 onwards, you're doing like a bunch of pokes with storm damage and like chipping your opponent down pretty hard. And then of course, once you get Maelstrom out and start like evolving him for free, you get pretty big like storm chunks in. So really cool deck. It is a bit reliant on drawing like very specific combinations of cards in the opening hand, and really wants a lot of its guys to live on board, which is just not super feasible right now. So it is fragile as a deck, but it does have very big payoffs. Next up, we have Royal Paladin, which is our Swordcraft clan. So this has, this is probably like the one class that has multiple different ways to sort of build it, even just thematically. So the pure Royal Paladin deck is more of a tempo value, almost aggro deck, which is very similar to what it was in actual Cardfight Vanguard. It has a lot of effects that sort of summon out extra units from the deck. There were 2 Paladin clans, Royal Paladin and Gold Paladin, that both have mechanics to summon out extra guys. Gold Paladin was always very low-cost random summons off the top, whereas Royal Paladin was higher quality but higher cost summons. And we see a bit of that here, where a lot of these Royal Paladin cards are going to build you boards. Some through the cheap random method, and some through specific searches. But it is a very themed around building boards, pumping your board, and trying to swing with your specific units. So the main guys we have here are actually starter deck cards. Alfred Early, that evolves into King of Knights Alfred. is a Storm Twin Drive body that on Evolve searches for a cost 3 or lower Royal Paladin follower and summons it. And then if you have at least 15 Royal Paladin cards in your cemetery, it and this follower get +1/+1. You'll see like 15 Royal Paladin in cemetery requirement on a few of their top end pieces. It seems like a lot, but there's a lot of draw ditch in Royal Paladin, so they don't really want you to get there the same way as like Abyss might by milling or just having a lot of dudes die. Instead, it's a lot of draw ditch, sort of like hand filter stuff that's going to be getting you there. 15 is still a bit hard to do, but it gives you a better top end if the game goes long. Blaster Blade himself is one of the main themes of the deck. He's a 3-drop 3/3 that if he's put onto the field by an ability, he automatically evolves. And then, of course, he's just a 4/4 like removal effect on Evo, but when you're getting that for free, it's pretty good. So, of course, Alfred evolves him when he enters, and then the rest of the deck also has a number of cards that can either summon Blaster Blade or search for your Blaster Blade or get benefits from you having Blaster Blades. Gancelot gives you a lot of hand filter if you have a Blaster Blade in Cemetery. K allows you to flip your evolved Blaster Blades back face down so that when you keep recurring it out of Cemetery using like Wingle, you can keep using your Evos without like, even if you summon Blaster Blade more than 4 or more times, you can still get your Evo effects there. So it's a lot of just sort of tempo aggro kind of deck with a lot of recursion, summoning Blaster Blade, getting removal, and it has a fair amount of Storm available in it as well. The other thing you'll see out of Royal Paladin is the Majesty Lord Blaster deck. So Majesty Lord Blaster was the main character's sort of final boss unit of Season 1, where he uses both Blaster Blade and Blaster Dark, which is one of the sort of villain characters' main units, to sort of fuse together into this more powerful version called Majesty Lord Blaster. In Cardfight Vanguard, he wants both Blaster Blade and Blaster Dark to be in your soul, which is basically just the sort of main Vanguard stack that you've ridden up throughout the game. In Shadowverse, it's a bit easier. We just need one of each in our cemetery, and then we get extra bonuses for having additional pairs in our cemetery. So Blaster Blade, of course, is the card that we looked at with the previous deck, and then Blaster Dark is similar. Another 3-drop 3/3 Fanfare. He mills 2. The Evo is also just another removal effect where you deal 3 damage plus 1 more for every 5 Shadow Paladin in your cemetery. Majesty Lord Blaster is a 6-drop Storm follower that is going to, for every pair of Blade and Dark in your cemetery, you get to destroy an enemy follower on Fanfare. And then on Strike, if you just have one of each in your cemetery, he gets +2/+2. So he's a 6-drop 6/6 Storm Twin Drive, typically. They get some removal effects on play. Quite powerful, quite a cool thing to build the deck around. And the thing you're going to see with this deck, I mentioned that it's another like Royal Paladin build, but the deck can actually be mainly a Royal Paladin deck splashing a few Shadow Paladin cards, or it can be mainly a Shadow Paladin deck splashing a few Royal Paladin cards. Since we have both Blaster Blade and Blaster Dark, each of these clans has separate cards that sort of support the Blaster archetype, where in Sword, we have Starcall Trumpeter and K that are going to be Blaster support, as well as a few others. And in Shadow Paladin, in Abyss, we have Masquerade and Blaster Javelin that are going to gain benefits from blasters as well. So you can choose sort of either clan as a main base for the deck and then just splash in the like utility cards that help the blasters out from the opposite one, and build this either way. But no matter which way you go, Majesty Lord Blaster is your primary win condition, setting him up and then getting just really powerful Storm plus removal turns that can pressure your opponent out of the game. Moving into Rune, we have Pale Moon. So Pale Moon is probably the most unique clan that we get in the Shadowverse collab. It was not really what I can call a main character clan in Vanguard at this point in time that we're pulling from, but Lukier was a fan favorite unit, despite never really being particularly good. And unfortunately, the Shadowverse deck is similar, very unique, very cool. A lot of people like it, but I don't think it's particularly strong for a few reasons. It has really good text, but it's also just a very like high variance, fragile deck similar to Aquaforce. So in Cardfight Vanguard, Pale Moon uses the Soul, which again is sort of just the stack under your main Vanguard. Generally, it's just going to consist of the cards that you ride each turn as you increase your Vanguard's grade. But in Pale Moon and a couple other clans specifically, they'll have effects that can put cards like just randomly from the top of your deck into your Soul or into your Soul through other means as part of effects. We don't have a Soul in Shadowverse, but what we are going to use is the Banished Zone. So this deck is going to have a lot of cards that either random banish or like specific banish or banish themselves to fill your banish zone, and then you're going to gain benefits from hitting thresholds in your banish zone. You're going to have ways to sort of tutor things out of your banish zone, use it as like a utility pile, or just summon a bunch of dudes from your banish zone. So Lukier here summons a cost 4 or less, 3 or less, and 2 or less, and just sort of makes a board out of nothing, all from your banish zone, which is a pretty cool kind of top-endy thing to have. And the rest of the deck is going to do just a lot of other cool stuff. So you can see Nightmare Doll Alice lets you draw a card if you have 5 cards in Banish Zone, and then can summon a guy out of it on Evo. Purple Trapezist lets you draw and then banish from hand, or if you already have 5 in Banish, you can give any Pale Moon follower on your field Storm, meaning it is a 2-cost 2/3 Storm on its own. But once you set up big late game turns using Lukier, you could like summon Purple Trapezist and give Lukier Storm and hit for 5, which is kind of cool. A bunch of the other lower rarity cards in the deck are also here just to sort of set up your banish. So like Jumping Jill banishes 2 from the top. Dynamite Juggler banishes 1, and then if you have 5 or more, he deals 2 to your opponent. Mistress Hurricane can banish herself as a 3 damage removal spell, essentially. Or if it has Storm on Fanfare, if you have at least 5 cards in your banish zone. So you have a lot of cool Storm, a lot of just sort of like board building utility. Part of the issue is that since a lot of your banish is just random off the top of your deck, you could banish key pieces that you need. Like banishing your Lukiers always feels awful because it's hard to get them back out, and then you kind of lose a lot of your top end pressure. The deck unfortunately doesn't have a lot of removal built into it, which is one of its big issues. And it is kind of reliant on hitting these big like Lukier Storm bursty turns to actually be able to kill your opponent. So there are some issues with it, but it is a very cool theme to sort of have in the deck. Very cool mechanically. So I'm interested to see if people play around with it and get it into a point, maybe mixing some of the cards from other clans in to cover its weaknesses, to sort of get it into a playable position, because I do think it's a really cool one. Moving into Dragoncraft, we get Kagero. So if you're familiar with Kagero in Cardfight Vanguard, dragons early on were typically just like the removal clans. So Kagero was it gained a counterpart in season 2, similar to how Royal Paladin gained Gold Paladin. Kagero gained Narukami, where Narukami is cheaper but more restrictive removal. Kagero was more expensive but specific removal that you could use to sort of pop anything. But Kagero is also home to Draconic Overlord, the original card that restands and can attack multiple times. So guess what? We are going to see that in here. We do have our makeshift wannabe Albert's. Well, I say that. Really, Albert is a makeshift wannabe Draconic Overlord. This deck has no defining characteristics. Its theme is remove your opponent's guys, draw cards, and have everything be overstatted. And that's it. So I don't want to sound like the Doom poster here, but this deck is broken. Maybe not broken, but it is definitively the best deck out of the set, and probably the best deck in the format. Every card has like 8 more lines of text than it should have. They're like all board wipes with Storm that also give you burn damage to your opponent's face. It's kind of ridiculous. I guess we can look at some of the cards here. So base Draconic Overlord from the starter deck. actually does kind of the same thing he does in Vanguard, where you can attack a follower, and if you deal combat damage to it, he restands and can attack again. He gets Storm at Overflow if you have another Kagero follower on your field, so later in the game you can play him, evolve him, and then swing at something to kill it, untap, and then swing at your opponent's face, which gives you 4 drive checks because he has Twin Drive, so a lot of chances to hit like heal triggers or critical triggers, whatever, just to sort of get, you know, that extra added value. Draconic Overlord, the end, is a 7-cost 6/6 Storm and Ward that also board wipes your opponent and can untap on attack by discarding another copy of himself. So he can attack twice, which represents, you know, casual 12 damage. It's like we're playing Worlds Beyond Albert here. Card's nuts, and it's not even the best card in the deck. Burning Horn Dragon is a 2-drop 3/2 that burns your opponent every time you drive check, and sometimes it's a 5/4, and it has Rush. Aleph is a 3-drop 3/3 that evolves for 1 into a 4/4 that summons... Well, it puts any Kagero follower that's not a copy of itself into your EX area from top 3 and gives it -3 cost. So generally, you play this on like turn 3 going second, and you get a 4/4 and another free 3-drop on turn 3. So you get like 7/7 or 7/8 of stats on turn 3. And he twin drives, so if you rush into something, you can also just hit triggers, and whatever you summon might have removal effects or cantrip effects or whatever. Also, later into the game, he just free evolves himself automatically, which lets you, you know, also evolve whatever you summon off of him, or like drive point whatever you summon off of him. Everything in this set is, like, deck is broken for no good reason. The one card of note, Vortex Dragon, the 5-cost 6/6, that card's limited to 1. You can only play 1 of them. He's a 5-cost 6/6. Cool. That Fanfare banishes 3 from your cemetery to destroy 2 enemy followers. Real cost for a real effect. Thanks, Cygames. Yeah, there's not much to say about this deck, really. It's just a pile of good cards. It has no, like, thematic coherency or whatever. It's just good cards. Shadow Paladin. We're back to cards with actual cool mechanics. Kind of. So Shadow Paladin is Abyss. So it does kind of care about Necrocharge. However, instead of being cards in your cemetery, it specifically cares about Shadow Paladin cards in your cemetery. Kind of just to make sure they're not broken with, like, all the generic Abyss stuff. Which is fine. The other thing that Shadow Paladin does in actual Cardfight Vanguard is it sacks off its own cards, like off of its field, to gain bonuses. We don't actually have a lot of that in the Shadowverse set. Other than Phantom Blaster Dragon. So as an additional cost to play him, you have to sack a Shadow Paladin from your board. If you sack Blaster Dark, he evolves automatically on Fanfare. And then he's a 3-cost 4/3 Storm that evolves into a 5/4 Storm that gets to destroy an enemy follower if you have 10 Shadow Paladin in Cemetery. So really cool dude. He's just a 3-mana 5/4 Storm or whatever. A lot of your later turns are going to be built around setting up, like, play Blaster Dark, evolve it, blow something up on your opponent's board, maybe, like, swing into something on your opponent's board, and then sack the Blaster Dark to play Phantom Blaster Dragon, evolve for free, blow something up, 5 your opponent, maybe 7 them if you hit a crit trigger. Really cool plays like that. It is kind of a generic tempo aggro, make board kind of deck, but it has the whole Abyss theme of filling your cemetery. Blaster Dark mills 2. Blaster Dark is actually, we're not really going to talk about it in the Abyss section, but Blaster Dark is one of the best generic Abyss cards that we're going to get for a long time. Just because it's, even outside of a Shadow Paladin deck, it is Dragon Warrior that mills 2 on play. So, good card. The rest of the deck is a little bit of ways to, like, fill your cemetery. You have things like Masquerade mills 1 on play. Blaster Javelin discards a card to search for Phantom Blaster Dragon or Blaster Dark, which of course fills your cemetery a bit, and helps you just set up really good turns. And then a lot of ways to benefit from having cemetery. So Grim Reaper is a 3/2 Storm if you have 10 Cemetery. Abyss Healer is kind of like a bigger Demonium if you have 10 Cemetery. Masquerade actually gains Rush and Bane at 10 Cemetery, and Strike deals 2 to your opponent if you have a Blaster in your Cemetery, which is really easy. There's like 9 cards with Blaster, no, 12 cards with Blaster in their name that you can play in this deck, so without even going into the Royal Paladin ones. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. It's a really cool deck. I think it actually has like pretty good legs compared to some of the other Vanguard decks. Oracle Think Tank is our last clan here. It is the Havencraft clan. In Cardfight Vanguard, Oracle Think Tank was a big brain deck. The Tsukuyomi decks, this unit you see here, were essentially a chain of cards that you would play like turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, that let you look at the top 5, 7, however many cards of your deck, take a card out of them, and then put the rest back on the bottom of your deck in any order. You didn't play any cards that shuffled, so as you played through the game and kept stacking cards on the bottom of your deck, you could memorize the order that you were putting them in, and then once you got all the way back around to the bottom of your deck, to the bottom of your deck, now being the top, you would theoretically know the sequence of every card in your deck, which means you know where the triggers are. So if you attack and your opponent guards and like a trigger is enough power to break through their guard, you just already know whether you're going to hit it or not and exactly how to sort of plan out your turn. So very sort of like big brain planning, thinking kind of deck. And it keeps a lot of that here, which is really cool. So you don't really see that in Full Moon Tsukuyomi. She's sort of the payoff at the top end, but a lot of cards that we have here. So like Half Moon Tsukuyomi, Fanfare, you get to look at top 3, put any number on top, the rest on bottom. So Scry from Magic the Gathering. CEO Amaterasu lets you do 2. And then even in our sort of smaller guys, we have a lot that Maiden of Libra lets you do 5, Coco lets you do 5. So we have lots of ways to rearrange the top of our deck, move stuff we don't want to the bottom, stack our trigger units on top so we know when we're going to be drive checking into our trigger units. And on top of that, we have cards like Wise Man that let us put cards from our cemetery back third from the top of our deck. There's a handful of cards that do this in the set that all put them third from the top. So realistically, you can stack them there and then sort of rearrange them where you want, or just know that they're there for next turn. And this allows you to recycle your triggers and keep putting them back on top of your deck to keep hitting them on drive checks. And we, of course, have some of these cards that have effects that activate when you drive check a trigger specifically. So not only are you getting the bonus benefit from the trigger unit itself, you're also getting additional effects on top of that. And it can kind of snowball into just like really crazy power gains and stuff that can run over your opponent. So really cool deck, kind of setup reliant, but the payoffs are huge. And it's another one that's like actually worth playing, just because trigger units are so strong, and this is the deck that can abuse them the hardest. I will say specifically outside of Full Moon Tsukuyomi, there's like very little Storm in this deck, in Oracle Think Tank, which the best way to abuse knowing where your triggers are is being able to just like slam a card and immediately storm your opponent to hit the triggers. So Oracle Think Tank will very frequently splash in either Maelstrom from Aqua Force, the 3-drop 3/3 Storm, or some of the Draconic Overlord cards from Kagero, in order to just have extra Storm followers that can like take advantage of all these triggers. Looking at some of the non-Vanguard decks that get support here, there's only a few, and none of them are like particularly high tier. I think they're really cool decks. I think they're worth playing, but looking at Japan's meta, which is maybe not the best idea, but looking at sort of what they had, these decks didn't really show up that much. But I think they're real decks. I think the support that they get here is like noteworthy. Swordcraft gets Spartacus support. So Spartacus, of course, is the win condition of decking yourself out. And Royal Paladin in particular gives us 3 new 1-cost followers that all draw a card. So Barkgall is basically Bowringer Angel. Mirabiru just reveals a Royal Paladin to draw a card, and Margul discards a Royal Paladin to draw a card, which is, 9 potential new things we can add to our deck to draw a card for 1 play point, which lets us lean into an Altar Plane Arbiter strategy, which of course mills 5 cards, helps us get closer to decking out. So these cards do actually, in my opinion, make Spartacus finally like a real win condition, not just like an alternate win condition that you might put in Natura or something. I think this is the point where it hits like we're building around Spartacus. And I'm really curious to see if that actually takes off and is as playable as I hope it is. Runecraft gets support for, another deck I'm a fan of, the Idolatry deck, the Lashena deck. So the main thing that we're getting here is actually a neutral spell. It's a 3-cost neutral spell. You choose one of the following modes. You either deal 4 damage to an enemy follower, give your leader +4 defense, or add a follower from your cemetery back to your hand. Main thing here is so there's more text on it actually. If you have 3 face-up drive points in your Evolve deck, you get to do all 3 modes. So you get to heal 4, shoot something for 4, and add a follower back to your hand. That's really good. The individual mode's not great, but getting all 3 for 3 play points is really good. And of course, since we're in Rune, our favorite card that really loves 3-cost spells, Merlin, lets us flash this back out of our cemetery on Evo, which lets us recur it over and over again, heal a bunch, use it for removal, and keep adding cards like Zealot of Destruction back to our hand from cemetery to get more removal, more healing, more burn, which gives this deck like a really good end game, I think. Drive points are essentially just the carrots of Cardfight Vanguard. They function basically the exact same way as the carrots in Uma Musume. Only difference is that they also give single drive in addition to rush. So we play Turquoise Beast Tamer and Midnight Bunny, which are both cards that you can give drive points to. Turquoise Beast Tamer for 2 damage removal, and Midnight Bunny for a cantrip effect. Which neither of them are insane, but the payoff for getting the drive points is really good. Dragoncraft. You'll never guess what the cool new deck in Dragoncraft is. It's Kagero. It's literally just the Kagero deck. The downside is that you don't get access to the starting Vanguard, and you don't get trigger effects. The upside is that you get Blazing Breath, Dragon Oracle, and Zelganea, and Forte if you really want it. This deck is just worse than Kagero Vanguard, but we're in a trio format right now. Only one person on your team can play Vanguard. Someone else can play Dragon, so you can just put 2 Kagero decks on your team. And believe me, it's real. It works. Kagero the cards are just that kind of busted that if you can put 2 of it on your team, why wouldn't you? I don't think this deck is like... I think Kagero Vanguard is definitively like the number 1 deck. I don't think Kagero Dragon is like a solid number 2. But it's definitely like in that tier with everything else. So it is worth knowing about and considering. And yeah, it's a real deck. So, you can ramp into your Draconic Overlords. That's crazy. Abysscraft. Abyss Ektar gets support, which is kind of cool. As I mentioned before, Blaster Dark is kind of just like the best generic Abyss card we'll get for a while. I mean, we get Icy next set, but Blaster Dark's really good. He's our like new go-to 3-drop 3/3 Evo. And he mills 2, which helps us sort of speed up Ektar and live through the early game, which has always been Abyss's problem. And it just so randomly happens that a lot of the good Shadow Paladin payoffs are 2-drops. So you can build a primarily 2-cost deck of a lot of... Or not a primarily 2-cost deck, a primarily Shadow Paladin deck with Ektar as a top end. And then you get to like reanimate Grim Reapers, reanimate Masquerades, stuff like that. And they're kind of just better than the Ektar targets we have right now. And you get like a better aggressive early and mid game. So... I think it's like the better way to play Ektar now, if you want to play Ektar. I'm not sure whether it's better than just playing Shadow Paladin Vanguard, but again, We're in trios format. You can only have one Vanguard on your team. That person, excuse me. Oh man, that person should be playing Kagero. My throat doesn't even want to say the name. That person should be playing Kagero. So if you have someone that wants to play Shadow Paladin, Ektar is probably like the next best way to go. And I do think it's like a deck. It has text. Tier list. Okay, a lot of the decks I just talked about might not be on here. Unfortunately. That doesn't mean they're not worth looking at. These tiers are things I agree with, but are also heavily based on the results that Japan put out during this set. This is not like a one-to-one. I did move some stuff around based on how I think it is, but there are certainly decks that I have not tested or have enough experience with or had a chance to play yet that are probably playable and are just not on here. So don't yell at me for not putting your favorite deck on here. If there are decks from previous sets that have been existing for a while that are no longer on here, it's probably because you shouldn't be playing them. I will say that. Starting with tier 3, these are decks that are like definitely competitively viable. You just have to know what you're doing and or really want to play them. In a trios format, these decks are more realistic to play because you can't just play 3 of the best deck. You have to play things that aren't the best deck. So if you like these decks, they're reasonable. Natura Sword. It didn't actually get anything here, but somehow it actually matches up like pretty reasonably into Kagero, all things considered. Kind of just because it has good scaling removal and good card advantage, and it heals a bit. Not a ton, but a bit. And Mistelina's Good Storm, and Princess Strike deals 6, which is the exact amount of defense that Dragonic Overlord the End has as a ward. So you can always just pop their Dragonic Overlord the End and hit them for probably as much as they hit you for, really. So yeah, Natura Sword is somehow like back on the menu. And you get Spartacus as like an alt win condition still. The mid-range, like, merchant, black and white kind of sword deck. This deck falls off pretty hard just because somehow Kagero just has bigger numbers and more removal. I don't know how that works, but yeah, mid-range kind of just eats it here. The deck doesn't like actually get worse. It's just other decks are doing the same thing better. If you like the deck already, keep playing it. But like, if you want to just play cards with more text, play Kagero? Question mark. Spartacus. I'm putting it in tier 3. It basically never showed up at all in Japan until set 11. But the people that played it and did well with it in set 11 were already testing it during this format and were just not entirely convinced that they wanted to play it for like a major event. They were still sort of in the process of refining it. I think looking back, knowing how they ended up refining it in set 11 and applying that backwards to CP03, the deck is still very functional, and I think it's worth looking at. It being an alt win condition deck, you don't actually have to care about killing your opponent. You just have to care about surviving. And let me tell you, it's a lot easier to survive against things like Kagero when you don't have to worry about killing them back, because you can put all your effort into like killing their followers, staying alive, healing, etc. And I think that makes Spartacus like, you know, a real deck. Idolatry. This deck also doesn't have to care about killing its opponent because you just passively do it, which is good. My main worry about Idolatry is that your first couple turns are actually too slow. And it might take a little too long to get the drive points online to have the spell actually good. Kagero's bodies are just so big that you kind of face the issue Lashena has always had of you need like a safe turn 4 to actually play Lashena, and I don't think Kagero is going to give you that. But into every other matchup, the deck is probably like insane. Amulet Haven. Still pretty good because you heal 1,000,000 life and you have banish effects, which are good against a lot of things that want to recur right now. And you can also play quick timing removal to stop Draconic Overlord the End from eating half of your life at a time. So yeah, it's just any like control deck with good removal is actually like kind of fine in the Kagero. You just have to be a deck that has good enough ways to kill them afterwards. Amulet Haven, I think, is like maybe does, because Alexiel deals 8 damage, which is good. Kagero doesn't really have healing outside of heal triggers, so yeah, Amulet Haven, reasonable deck. Shadow Paladin, reasonable deck. We already talked about this one for the most part. Yeah, it's a cool deck. It's like the Abyss deck that you should probably be playing if you want to play like Abyss, like the Necro Charge focused Abyss. Just play Shadow Paladin instead, because you're gonna get all that same thematic stuff, just in kind of a better shell right now. You could also like interchange this out with Ektar. I don't have Ektar on here mainly just because of space, but this spot could be interchangeable with Ektar. And Oracle Think Tank, which I have had to shorten down to OTT. That's what Vanguard players are going to call it anyway. Deck is cool. Deck is really good. It might actually be tier 2. I just haven't really gotten to like test or refine that. It very well could be tier 2. You get a lot of deck control, which is important. You get to see all your good cards every game because you look at like 20 cards off the top of your deck at a time. And you get to abuse triggers, which are the most broken thing about Vanguard, probably. Tier 2, Kuon. Kuon is still good. It has to change its game plan a little bit, because previously it is trying to beat Sword, so it has a lot of 2 damage removal early to stop like goblins and stuff, and stop Celia. Now, unfortunately, you're not worried about 2 defense followers, you're worried about 3 defense followers because of Kagero. So you have to lean a bit heavier into 3 defense removal, which is harder to come by and more expensive. So there is a world where your games end up with you having to play removal every turn to stay alive, and you don't get to fill your cemetery as quickly to actually execute your kill plan. And if your opponent kind of runs you out of resources before you get to do that, or if you just run out of removal and have to start playing your draw spells and they get to hit you because of it, you're probably not winning as many games as you were before, but you're still a good deck. You just don't have... It's harder to turbo because you're going to have to focus a lot more on staying alive. Earthright. Earthright's still really good. All of your cards are still over spec, so you don't have as much healing because Gingerbread House is now down to 1, but you still get everything else. Riley is still insane. Caradwin is still insane. Faust is still insane. So, like... and all those come online before Draconic Overlord the End, so I think this deck can, like, actually compete with Kagero fine enough. Fine enough, yeah. Dragon Kagero is tier 2. It's the Kagero deck, but minus triggers, plus Oracle, plus Zilganea, plus Blazing Breath, probably. Solid deck. And Vampire Abyss, also still as good as it has been. It's aggressive, it has healing, it has removal. All these decks that were like the broken tier 1 decks before are still super playable. Set 9 was a crazy set in terms of just like the viability and longevity of decks it gave us. So these decks, they've been doing their thing. They're still going to keep doing their thing, especially in trios. Like a team of Kagero, Earthright, Vampire is probably just as good as having the Dragon deck. Like, yeah. Royal Paladin I have in tier 2. I think it is a bit better than Shadow Paladin and OTT, just because you have like a lot of consistency cards and a lot of board generators. Which having wide boards is one of the ways to sort of just outpace Kagero in the early game. They don't start really getting good board clears until like Vortex on 5, but he's limited to 1, so really like turn 6 and onwards is where they start getting board clears. So if you can pressure them before that, like turn 3, turn 4, by making boards, you should be in the clear. Maybe not in the clear, but like that's how you're going to win. Shadow Paladin can also do this to an extent using cards like Maha. I think Royal Paladin's just a little more consistent and efficient at it. And tier 1, maybe tier 0, Kagero. I think Tier 0 is probably an exaggeration. We'll see what tournaments end up looking like. Trios, of course, because you have to have 3 different decks on every team. We're going to see Kagero everywhere, because why wouldn't you play it? But also, we're going to see other decks top 2, because you can't play 3 Kagero. And by the time we get to BCS... Well, okay, Grand Showdown is going to be CP03 format, so it's going to be Kagero everywhere, probably. Or people just really trying hard to build decks to beat Kagero. But by the time we get to BCS in singles, we're going to be out of this format. Kagero will still be good, but we will have other decks that can compete against it better than this current format. So yeah, I've probably made it sound like this is just like Kagero the game. It's not. Earthright, Vampire, some of the other Vanguard decks, Spartacus, like these are all Kuon, like all real decks. You can play any of them, but when you walk into a tournament, Kagero is public enemy number 1, and you have to know how you're going to beat Kagero. That's the sort of defining thing here. You have to know how you're going to play against Kagero. You can't just walk in with no game plan, or they will beat your ass 7 rounds in a row. So yeah, here's my tier list. Let me know what you think. Thanks for sitting through 46 minutes of me rambling. I actually... Real talk, I really like this set. I know a lot of... The announcement of Cardfight Vanguard as a collaboration pack was a very divisive announcement. I really like it. I think they did a really good job designing most of the clans. Even Kagero is kind of just true to how it was in actual Vanguard. It was always a tier 1 deck. It always had just really over-spec busted cards. So, you know, they did a really good job of staying true to the clans. There's a lot of creative design space. And I think a lot of the decks are really fun to play. So, yeah, overall, thumbs up. I would like to see an extra collab pack for this that, like, expands upon it a little bit at some point in the future, like we got for Uma and Cinderella Girls. Until next time, I'll have some deck profiles out, obviously, for these Vanguard decks, and hopefully a few of the, like, Spartacus and Lashena that got upgrades, and are, like, viable again. So... Until then, there should be some videos on the screen for you to check out, and I'll see you next time.